Rising. Happy Monday morning. We have a stupendous show for you today. And Briahna Joy Gray is back. This morning, the joy is all mine, because I'm so happy to see you.
Well, look, I enjoyed being on vacation, but Robby, I got to tell you, I missed being out on Barbie Oppenheimer week and the opportunity to swap takes on these important films.
We actually have been, like, the producers had to interrupt us because we had so much to catch up on.
It's true.
Maybe we'll get to Barbie later in the show. I know you guys are demanding, craving Bree's take and my reaction. So we'll see. We'll see how much of the actual legitimate political news we get through today. On that note, what do we have to discuss?
Well, Robby, a former friend and business partner to Hunter Biden will give closed-door testimony before the House Oversight Committee today. Devon Archer, who sat beside Hunter Biden on Burisma's board, is expected to testify that the younger Biden frequently roped his father, then Vice President Joe Biden, into conference calls with foreign business partners. Now, yesterday, Oversight Committee Chair James Comer accused the Department of Justice of trying to block Archer's testimony. Lawyers at the DOJ apparently moved on Saturday to set a date for Archer to report to federal prison on unrelated charges. However, Archer himself disputes the suggestion that the DOJ is attempting to interfere with his testimony. According to reporting in Politico, it's very unlikely the judge presiding over Archer's criminal case will order him to prison in the few hours left before his testimony.
Now, Archer is the closest former associate of Hunter Biden to testify in Republicans' investigation of his alleged corrupt foreign business dealings. He's also the first witness to speak directly to the FD 103 complaint alleging a pay-for-play scheme involving both Hunter and Joe Biden. So, look, I think everyone has to concede at this point that these are it's not the case that there's no there there. There are people who have the whistleblowers who have come forward, publicly identified. They're not anonymous for the IRS investigation. Shapley and Ziegler. Now you have this friend and close associate of Hunter Biden involved in the exact relevant influence peddling that we're concerned about. You can certainly say, well, there could be a reasonable explanation. Hunter Biden gets to make a defense. Perhaps this Devon Archer character is trying to come up with something to reduce his own criminal culpability. Have a bigger fish caught by the justice system. So it's fine to proceed cautiously, but you can't say, well, there's no evidence of any. There are people who have looked into this, who know Hunter Biden, who have come forward and are speaking on the record, and that just can't be dismissed. And speaking to the real area of concern, which is, what does Joe Biden know? Right. How involved was he? Is he actually on these conference calls in a way where he's participating and helping? Yeah,
I think it's undeniable that the optics of the kinds of statements that we know Hunter Biden has made in terms of calling in the big guy and holding out his father as someone who could help him in his business efforts, it's clear. It looks bad, and if it were to be true, this is the part that we haven't connected the dots yet. If it turns out that it wasn't just a one-sided kind of performative offer on behalf of Hunter Biden, but that Joe Biden actually did engage with his son on a business basis, now we start to have some liability that actually attaches to the president. That's the smoking gun that up until this point has not been found. And in the defense of kind of the liberals who have been very critical of the Republicans' interest in this particular case, it has been some time now without a smoking gun. And this testimony could cut either way. If Archer finally does give some evidence, like some people expect him to testify, that Hunter Biden frequently put his father on speakerphone to talk to Burisma officials at the height of his lobbying work for the Ukrainian company. That's from the Washington Examiner. If there is that sort of testimony, it ratchets up the claims conservatives have been making to another level. That's pretty significant, especially in the context of this campaign season. However, if it cuts the other way, and Archer doesn't give the level of testimony that actually adds anything new to this equation, it does start to feel like this could be the death knell of claims that Joe Biden is culpable in some way here.
Yeah, President Biden has set a very high bar for himself here, because Karine Jean-Pierre has repeatedly said, when asked about this at White House press briefings, that Joe Biden had no knowledge of his son's business dealings and no involvement in his son's business dealings. She said some variation of those two things multiple times. So that doesn't leave a lot of wiggle room to be on conference calls with Burisma or with other entities that Hunter Biden has arranged. Unless he thought he was like dialing into the family Christmas holiday or something, and it's actually Burisma executives. I don't know. It's starting to seem it would just be totally implausible that he actually has no knowledge. I mean, that would contradict that, wouldn't it? In what way could you straightforwardly say he has no knowledge of the business dealings if he was actually on multiple telephone calls with the business being dealt?
Yes, and frankly, the fact of Joe Biden's involvement from a vice presidential perspective in Ukraine at the time, it strains credulity. At a certain point, you would expect, if there was no bad behavior on the part of Joe Biden, that he would be saying to his son and to the public, there has to be very strict Chinese walls established between the two of us, because I, in my professional capacity and dealing in the very same environments that you're dealing in a professional capacity, I'm telling that to you as my son. Do not use my name. And he should be telling the public at the same time. Contemporaneously to all of this, I made sure there was distance between myself and my son, because I understood that the optics of this were very bad at the time. And the fact that the explanation that we've gotten isn't saying, well, obviously this looks bad, and so here are the protections I put in place, but I just had no knowledge of his business dealings. That starts to strain credulity, and I think it feels a little disrespectful to the public that they would take that kind of an explanation at face value. That's not to say that there was any wrongdoing at all, but that the administration hasn't felt any need to offer anything more in the way of explanation when there was these kind of parallel business tracks in this one region, combined with Hunter Biden's lack of experience or know-how, given the salary he was being given at the time. I mean, it doesn't pass the smell test.
Which was cut in half when Joe Biden stops being vice president, right? Burisma reduced Hunter Biden's salary by half when that was no longer going to be seen as such a viable asset, from their end. Again, Joe Biden can argue that he is innocent of all, that he had no idea, he wasn't involved, he doesn't know what's going on, and his name was taken in vain by his son or other people to try to make it look like there's some connection there. But he should, I don't know. He should be on the record, being furious about that. Right? Where's the angry voicemail where he says, "Hunter, cut this shit out. This is not. I don't take my name this way. I'm not helping at all. This is totally inappropriate." Yeah, you don't have that.
I get he's a loving father.
He doesn't have to prove a negative, sure, but.
I get that he wants to keep affirming that he's proud of his son and that he doesn't want to buy into. There is so much kind of prurient interest in his family life and people who do want to make bad faith attacks that are focused more on Hunter Biden's personal problems and the embarrassing nature of what was found on his laptop. And I get him feeling defensive about Hunter, but at a certain point, you cannot deny that there are these national security interests and implications, and that your son has put you in a tough spot, and that you owe an explanation to the American people more than that you've given so far. And I wonder, I do see some interesting parallels here when you look to, at a much smaller scale, the way that the story about the 7th grandchild has unfolded. There was mostly conservative interest in that. Then the New York Times wrote those 2 op-eds critical of the Biden family's choice to continue to characterize themselves as only having 6 grandchildren, very explicitly 6 grandchildren. And what does that mean that there's this 4-year-old out there that knows her grandfather is president and who is publicly dismissing her and writing her out of the public family narrative? After that, over the weekend, the Biden family released a story to a very friendly People magazine who covered their choice to now shift to saying there's 7 grandchildren. But only after there started to be pressure from liberal institutions like the New York Times. And I have observed, I was listening to Pod Save America, the podcast run by a bunch of Obama-era speechwriters and the like. Even they, on the latest episode, were talking about, almost nervously alluding to, the messages about the big guy and this story for the first time I think I've ever heard on the podcast, outside of like dismissive, the right-wingers are trying to come for Joe Biden. And I do wonder if we're experiencing a shift now where it will finally force Joe Biden to say something a little bit more concrete, disclaiming not just the relationship here, but having some sort of articulation about why we should trust his pat disclaimer.
Right, it's starting to feel like this is another mainstream media, it's lab leak type thing over again. Where like, there's nothing to this. You're crazy if you think there is. then eventually, well...
And it becomes a bigger story because of the denial. At this point, for lab leak, for the Hunter Biden laptop, the bigger story was the gaslighting by the media that there was no there. And, I think there was some danger that this could happen to Joe Biden, even if, in fact, there was no there.
And let's remember, there were some stakes to this for Trump, for the rival campaign. Trump was impeached the first time because he allegedly improperly asked for a kind of investigation in Ukraine into this Biden connection to what was going on there. Yeah. That resulted in him being impeached. So whether there was something corrupt going on there is, I'm sorry, a very nationally relevant political question, given Trump is likely to be the nominee again.
Yeah, for sure.
We'll have more Rising right after this. Stay with us.